Good evening. Good evening. It's your host. Uh-oh. We don't have no sound. Wait just a second here, baby. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Test 1, 2. Audio. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. So, it's your host, Brian Forbes. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Black Factor, where perspective is everything, and I got the news that you can use. Not that other stuff. I got the good stuff. Mr. David Neal is in the building. Kenneth Holden in the building. David Neal, I just ran across a picture of me and you the other day. I'm going to post that thing and I'm going to show it to you. Just for shits and giggles. Anyway, Angela Coco is in the building. I see you. So tonight, y'all, we're going to do something just a little different. Before we get this thing kicked off, now we're going to talk about our usual shenanigans, but we're not going to get too in depth about it because I ain't going to lie, y'all, I'm suffering from political burnout. Y'all know I got 14 screens in this room, and all I do all day, every day is sit and listen to the naysayers, the sycophants, and even the people who just, around here making up stuff. But anyway, and sometimes it gets a little overwhelming. I ain't going to lie to y'all. But today, we're going to do something just a little different. That's what prompted me to just change things up just a little bit. So y'all hang tight, and we're going to get this party started. Yep. All right. All right, let me start out first by giving homage to the late, great Dr. Martin Luther King on today, his born day. Mad props to that man. There's a lot I can say about it, but I ain't gonna. It's self-explanatory. I happen to live in the city who has the largest and most fantastic Martin Luther King Day parade in the entire country. And unfortunately, we weren't able to do that today. Obviously, for obvious reasons. We got that COVID. The COVID cooties is running around out here, and I ain't trying to catch that, even if I was going to be up on my horse. Anyway, so y'all see the counter over in the corner, inauguration. We got 1 day, 15 hours, 56 minutes, and 10 seconds. And I ain't gonna lie to y'all, I can't wait. Not that it's gonna be, not that we getting ready to just jump out there and things are just gonna automatically be, straight. Because, needless to say, we all have to deal with all of the fallout from everything that's going on. That man has left a hell of a trail of trash that has to be cleaned up. Maurice Thomas is in the building. What's going on, family? You dig? My man, my mellow from Chi-Town. Chi-Town's finest. West Side? No, even though I'm a South Side guy. All right, we got to give props to the West Side. Still Chicago, and when you don't live there no more, you give everybody their props. It don't matter. So, check this out, y'all. The name of tonight's show, Black Hair and White Fragility. Now, there's a reason that I'm talking about this tonight, but I'm gonna tell y'all straight up, right up front, you probably are gonna have more questions when this show is over than you do answers, because I'm about to put I'm about to muddy the water real bad. Ellen Ellis is in the building. My girl Dodie, what's going on? We go way back like two flats on a Cadillac. We gonna muddy the water today, y'all. I'm gonna put some stuff out here. And it's going to make you feel some kind of way. At least that's what I think. It makes me feel some kind of way. But the deal is, it's a subject matter that I did cover in the Black Factor, the book, when I wrote it. And it was something that I learned during that journey, because there are so many things that historically affect black people right now today that we truly are not aware of, or what the origins of them are, or why the things are the way they are. And so I like to try and bring light to those things because y'all know I like to tie history to what we're doing today. And so with that said, I want to get to the root of the problem, no pun intended, because we're going to be talking about black hair. Somewhat. We're going to be talking about black. Let me put it like this. Black hair is part of the subject, but it ain't the reason. Let me go there. All right. So I don't know how many of you knew this, but during the 1700s, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, late 1700s, early 1800s, late 1700s, there was, hey, Riri, thank you for checking in. There was a law put into place in Louisiana. Now, this was called, well, it actually had a few different names. One of them, it was called a Tignon law. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right, because I don't know if I am or not. You know, back then they had a whole bunch of, especially in Louisiana, because you got to remember, Louisiana shifted from being a French colony to a Spanish colony. That's a little known fact for some people that don't know geographically the history and about the Louisiana Purchase and all of the other stuff that went with it. Anyway, sumptuary laws is what it was. And they have another French pronunciation for this, which is, I got to find it. I ain't gonna lie, y'all. I took so many notes today and I'm so out of order that I just decided that I got to fish around and do this thing because it's not going to work. I can't do it in order. I'm screwed up today. Anyway, Bando du Buen Gobierno. Now, that stands for the Edict for Good Government. And that was done in 1786. And it was done in 1786 because there was, in fact, the king at the time, who was, I think it was George III. Wait a minute. I'm going to tell you in a second. Y'all bear with me. Bear with a brother. We're going to get this information out here today. Charles III, I'm sorry, not George II, Charles III of Spain. He demanded that the governor of Louisiana, he was the colonial governor of Louisiana at the time, he demanded that he establish public order and proper standards of morality because there were some things that they felt were getting out of pocket, right? Well, the thing that was getting out of pocket was the relationships between the white upper crust and black women. Some free, some not. That particular part of the country, Louisiana, they had laws in place, manumission laws, which allowed for slaves to actually purchase their own freedom. And so in that, the part of the, well, let me put it this way. What ended up happening was a lot of the female slaves found their way to being free. So the black population of Louisiana actually grew quite a bit. And in doing so, you had free black women who walked about freely, and lots of interracial relationships developed because of that. Now, the king, Charles III at the time, felt that there were moral improprieties taking place. And the moral improprieties had to do with black women who, during that time, were becoming more and more light-skinned because of interracial relationships. Now, what I'm getting at is that these improprieties, to some degree, or at least they use this as an excuse, were rooted, no pun intended, in black women's hair because they felt that black women were flaunting themselves, and he wanted that to stop. Okay, so these sumptuary laws, which was the Tignon law, was part of that, and they were passed in 1786 by the governor Esteban Rodriguez Miro, and they were created to prohibit Creole women which that, goes into the whole Spanish French origin and mix of people in Louisiana, which is why when you go there and visit, you notice there's an incredible mixture of people there. So the Creole and women of color, now, because they were very creative, of course, and free, they had the ability to dress their hair in ways that white women could not. Today, black women have ways of dressing their hair that white women cannot, and they do try. But at that time, these white women were very offended by black women because they didn't like the way that they presented in public. And they felt as though the black women were taking the white men, right? So this Tignon law was created so that black women would be forced to cover their hair. So what I'm getting at with this is that black hair has been criminalized and dehumanized for a very long time. People are made to feel, and had been made to feel up until recent years, that their hair, if worn in particular ways, particularly in natural ways that we should be wearing our hair, the way that it comes out of our head, is considered unattractive and unprofessional, which also lends to when you meet some, unfortunately, we run across black women and people of our race, of our color, who have low self-esteem because the images of beauty have been dictated by white people for a century or more. Not just a century, more, because this was the 1700s. And it just goes to show you how conditioning of people, particularly people who didn't have the ability to speak for themselves, so to speak, because, of course, even though they were free, we still were living under a country that allowed slavery. So the Tignon, the meaning of Tignon is it's a type of headscarf, a large piece of material tied or wrapped around the head to form sort of a turban, which during that time also, those turbans and things like that were a natural occurrence in other parts of the world, in the Middle East and things like that, even still. So they were forced, or by law mandated, to wear head coverings. This was the law because, again, white women felt that they did not have enough opportunity to get men of their own, of their race, because black women were dressing equally as fancy or better, and they also were able to wear adornments in their hair in different styles and curls, and they would put jewels and beads and different things in their hair, which some women still do today. But this was basically jealousy, and to be able to continue to control black people as usual. So the law dictated that black women must cover their head, which also takes us back to when we see some of the images that we look at in the movies and some of the other things that we remember from history. And you'll hear usually militant individuals talk about handkerchief head and things like that. And then what they're talking about is the fact that the women were forced to cover their hair during that time, and they just carried those traditional things. It became traditional, and they carried them forward in their lives. And in fact, when that was actually, when that particular law was struck down, that was during the transfer from when Spain was taken over by the United States. The laws got dropped, but the sisters continued to wear their head wraps. So when you sisters see other sisters out here with their head wraps on and they have the beautiful colors, because this is what they did back then. They found the best fabrics with the nicest textures, and they would wear the head wraps. This was a rebellion. Since they had to wear them, they wore them in ways that were even more attractive or equally, nothing is more attractive than a black woman's hair, but equally as attractive as them having to wear their hair. So to give you an example, this picture here, when you see our sisters in head wraps, just know that while supposedly forced into having to wear particular attire to satisfy the jealousy of others who could not do what they were doing, they still did it with flavor. Can't take that. You can't take that away. And everything, because think about it. Everything that we do, everything we've done right now today in this country gets co-opted. Everybody wants to be like us, but they just don't want to be us. They want to do the things we do. They want to hear our music. We create culture in this country, and we always have. They want to copy our dress. You got white women getting lip injections while you got sisters walking around upset with themselves because they got big lips. See, that's conditioning. And that's something that we must be very, very aware of and deal with and do something about. All of that is part of the conditioning. So my point is that black women's hair has been policed all the way back since the 1800s. So we're talking about 18th century, and here we are in the 21st century, and we still have to deal with not as much people and their concerns about the hair of other people. It's a sad thing. The military in recent years, I think, has relaxed their rules about hair, where as it pertains to black female enlisted in officers. Because again, there's levels of discrimination within it that still exist. And it's unfortunate that we still get gaslit by white folks to try and pretend like this is not a thing. And it is. It's just yet one other area of racism. I mean, hell. And it's funny because I was, it's funny when people like to try and accuse black people of being racist. By definition, that's not possible. We've never been the master. We've never been the one that could tell other people what to do. We've never been the one who could decide whether or not a person works or doesn't work, or to decide where a person lives or doesn't live. That's racism. We've never had that power. So, and we've never definitely been able to tell a white woman how she can and can't wear her hair at her job, especially if it's blonde and she has blue eyes. So we know the story there. Hey, Burnell, I see you. Phyllis Harris is in the building. Y'all just coming on through. Hey, Riri. So all of these things were legally enforced. But once those laws were struck down, my sister still wore the head wraps. Now, the funny thing about that is that there was another law that was put into place, strangely enough. Let me see. And I didn't even know about this one. I found out about it today. This law was passed in 1776. It prohibited free women of color from wearing shoes. Now, you free, but they had a law that said women of color, black women, you cannot wear shoes. You're not entitled to wear shoes. No shoes for black women. So my sisters, being the resourceful, creative, vibrant, vibrating beings that they are, they began wearing and fashioning sandals. And rather than wear shoes, they also then began to wear diamonds and jewels on their toes. Toe rings, y'all. They also decorated their sandals with other adornments, which basically is blinged out flip-flops. We see those all the time right now today. So that's just yet another one of those things that, y'all heard me talk about on a previous show, where I've said before that every time the oppressors continue to try and hurt, harm, distract, destroy, dehumanize black folks, all you're doing is making us stronger. All you're doing is making us be more creative. All you're doing is making us better. You're not hurting us. You're hurting yourself. The reason soul food is a thing is because black folks ate what they could. They ate what they were left over. And so now they are considered delicacies. It never fails. The short-sightedness of oppression is a thing that always manages to come back to haunt. Now that's just absolutely insane to me that black women were not allowed to wear shoes, but that's what happened. So here we are. Now, I want to make sure that I get all of this right. See, you got to remember all of these things. Free black women of color moving about in a society just posed a problem for everybody. They had to do something about it. And we know that the real reason for the laws had to do with basically jealousy and the inability to compete, which brings us all the way forward into the 19th century, where when it came time for black people to compete in sports, they were kept out until they weren't. And then it was a takeover. It's always that way. So the real question becomes, why do they always try to keep us out? Do I need to say why? I think y'all know. Because otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. That's just my opinion. I'm entitled to it. But like I said, this show is going to leave you with more questions than answers. I got a lot of questions. Shit, I got to figure them out. Let me say this. I ain't got to really figure them out. I know the real reason why, but I try to get a benefit of the doubt. Y'all know me. I try to make room for the possibilities. But, oh well. Anyway, the great comedian Paul Mooney first stated, if your hair is relaxed, white people are relaxed. If your hair is nappy, white people ain't happy. How true is that? Because if we wear our hair naturally and we embrace the beauty of the people that we are, for some damn reason, it's offensive to white folks. I never could figure that out. I guess because the fear of us embracing our beauty and our own self and not trying to emulate or assimilate to them and their culture and ways represents a distraction or a rebellion against the system that they have created. Funny thing about that is you got white folks right now running around rebelling against the system that they created. I ain't never seen so many angry white men mad at something that their ancestors put into place. Isn't it amazing? They're running around talking about how they want their freedom. They the freest sons of somethings in the world, and they don't think they free. In the freest country in the world, and they think their freedoms are being taken away. That is the most amazing crybaby shit I ever heard in my life. But hey, who am I? Always interested in policing black people, though. They want to tell us what we got wrong and what we need to do. And personally, I'm tired of it. It gets old. I don't know how many times I have had to tell someone else, stop policing black people and police your own people, and we don't have this problem. We didn't create racism. White people did. That's not a black problem. That's a white problem. Talking about, don't y'all always want to play the race card? Whose deck is it? Y'all put the card in there. Take that card out. Take the deck away. You don't have that problem no more. But you can't do it, because if you do that, then you give away your power. And we all know that power concedes nothing without demand. Got to have that. Without one, you don't get the other one. Now, also, during this time of the Tignon laws, and this is where we get ready to get funky with it, they had these things. And I'm going to give you the proper name for it. Oh, where is it? Where is it? Okay. Here we are. There was a thing called morgantic marriage. That, and also plaquage. That was a marriage between two people of two different stations. That is, and the morgantic idea of marriage, that also goes back to Europe. That's a European thing. But it carried over into, of course, these colonies. And what that means is that if you had a person who was a king or a person of royalty and they married someone who was beneath them, that was called a morgantic marriage. Now, in Louisiana, they had a term called being born into plaquage. Now, plaquage was in Louisiana during this same time a very big thing. Now, what that was, they used a term called, well, they called it a left-handed marriage. So a left-handed marriage, which was partially, it was because of the morganic thing, but also because of the uneven social rank, but it was also because white men were not marrying because it was illegal for a white man to marry a black woman, but they were common law married in a lot of cases. Most of the time, they weren't even married because these white men actually had wives, but then they had black women that they treated more like a wife than their actual wife. This was an acceptable practice during that time. And it was known as a common law marriage. Now, these women didn't have to work because their men took care of them, just like a husband does. But the Charles III didn't like that, nor did the governor, and they wanted these women to get back to work. So basically, they put it in part of that law that these women had to be basically subservient to whites. That was part of the reason for the Tignon laws, and of course them not having the shoes, because they wanted to try and strip them as much as they could of their adornments and their beauty, so that white women would have a better chance with white men. And of course, then according to Charles III, it would bring morality back. But what I find most interesting is the ability for them to find fault in the black women, but not the white men who were the ones with all the power and the control over everything. You're going to punish the women so that the men who have the power and the juice don't do what they're doing. That's kind of like a woman getting mad at the woman her man is cheating with. That woman ain't got nothing to do with him, with you. Holler at your man, but you ain't going to do that. So same thing here. They ain't going to say nothing to the men, but they're going to punish the sisters for being involved in the relationship. What a world we live in, y'all. Now, the thing is, you notice in talking about these Tignon laws and the plaquages and all of the other terms and names that they had for white men being attracted to black women, you've not once heard me say anything about black men and white women. Why? Because we all know that would be punishable by death to the white woman and the black man, except the black man would probably be punished severely before he was killed. So, brings me to my point of this show. How is it that we live in a society today where we are watching and have watched so-called, and I say so-called because I don't believe there's a thing called white supremacy because they're not superior over me. So-called white supremacists and white nationalists who hate black men and black life so much, yet they manage to be attracted to and will gladly sleep with black women. Told y'all I got more. It's going to be more questions than it is answers. Somebody help me with that one. This is the society that we're living in. And we've been living in this society. Nothing has changed. This goes all the way back to the beginning of slavery. So my question, it becomes, is this a love connection? Because see, if we assume that it ain't a love connection, then we discredit people who are in interracial relationships and happily married and, moving about in their life. But the question has to come up about culture, conditioning, and how you navigate that and then harbor certain ideas to go along with it. But this happens. Prime example, the gentleman from Hawaii who was arrested last week for the insurrection and the invasion of our capital, who has a white wife and they have a child. And it makes you wonder, how are you a white supremacist, a known and admitted white supremacist, yet you are married to and have a child with a black woman? See, I got questions. I'm confused. I'm at a loss. Is it fantasy? The forbidden fruit, as Phyllis Harris has kindly put in front of us today? Is that what this is? Is it a control thing? How do you hate me but can love my wife? There's some sick, twisted kind of thinking that has to take place. I would just love to interview. I would love to interview a white supremacist with a black wife. I would love to do that. I'd be probably speechless. I'd love to hear an explanation for what that's about without them being, diverting or being, just be honest. That would be amazing. Anyway, but here's the thing. We also know that during this time, Karen Owens say, how is a black woman with a white man who hates our own kind? Karen, only thing I can attribute to that is there is a level of self-hate that has to exist within a person that would allow them to love someone who could hate their own child. Let's say, for example, but again, that question becomes a matter of, let's take it back to slavery and let's look at the fact that slave owners had children with slaves. And in fact, often treated them as children rather than slaves. And many of them inherited things from these slave owners. Again, I got questions. I'm just, anyway. I mean, it's just amazing. When you think about slavery, think about it. It's like this. Slave owners looked at their slaves as livestock. Are you telling me that in that same vein, you would go out and sleep with a cow? with your cow, with your, I don't know. I mean, y'all, I'm reaching. I'm trying to understand. I don't get it. Of course, I guess I've heard stories about some of them screwing the cows and the sheep and some other stuff. Anyway, just the idea of this shit it's just something else. What are we talking about here? Then let's not forget the slaves that were raped. That's the part nobody wants to talk about in the history books. This is part of the things that we don't want to discuss and have not been discussed, and some of the things that they leave out of the classrooms in regard to the way our children are taught about how black people were treated in this country. What do we do with that? I think that not enough of us are aware of the conditioning that takes place and has taken place over the last couple of centuries that have placed black people in a position to not have to be oppressed by anybody else, and have become quite astute at doing it themselves. Riri asks, did that black and white couple actually have a KKK carrying and embracing a black woman in their living room wall? Riri, you know what? I'm not sure about that. To be honest with you, I actually was looking for that picture today. I know that I downloaded it last week. I can't find it. I'm going to find it. I wanted to find it for this show. But I actually searched the internet and I can't find it. And I searched hard. And that's unusual. So it makes me wonder, because I wasn't sure whether or not it was an actual photo of that couple. And I didn't want to make the assertion that it was. But I did want to look at it, and I was going to actually use it as part of this show to depict the twisted nature of these types of relationships. But I literally could not find that picture. I've got it somewhere saved, but the fact that I couldn't even find it online makes me believe that it was stripped from the internet for obvious reasons. So if any of you run across it, let me know. Send it to me. So, Thomas Jefferson, a president of these United States, who in his lifetime owned well over 600 slaves. At the time of his death, he had 400. But we know the famous story of Sally Hemings, who was his concubine, common law wife, slave. I guess you can call it, depending on where you stand, you can call it whatever you want to call it. But she had 6 children for him. 6. Some say they loved each other. Others say it wasn't that way. Who knows the truth? It was a long time ago. But he found it necessary to continue going down there and getting Sally pregnant. So I'm guessing that every time they did it, she didn't get pregnant. But I guarantee you, he was down there hitting it. That's for damn sure. So I know that he wasn't the only one. Of course, we also know that if a child had been born of a white woman by a black man or a slave, that child would have been killed. Probably she would have been killed, and he would have probably been tortured, beaten, hanged, stripped of his skin, boiled in oil, and anything else you could think of, and his genitals would have been cut off and all of that. But here's the really twisted thing. Now I'm about to get offensive. So if you have sensitive ears or you're not prepared for the subject matter, I suggest you switch off now. Buck breaking. Now, we talk about the twisted nature of a person who hates black people that loves black women. But we're also talking about a system of punishment, or at least that's what they were calling it, during the time of slavery, which I think was something else. Now, what is buck breaking? Mainly utilized by slave owners in the Caribbean, buck breaking was used against male slaves who were seen as defiant. The process involved the slave owner forcing the enslaved man to lower his pants, bend over a tree stump to ensure that his buttocks were propped up in the air just right. The enslaved man would then be flogged severely. This would weaken him so that he could not be able to resist the rape that followed. The white slave owner would then proceed to rape the slave several times. This form of punishment was worsened by the fact that it would be done in full view of friends and family. And slaves, of course, everybody else. This was a some sort of masochistic just some type of sex show. I'm really, you got to have a twisted mind to even think that this is a good idea. Anyway, in addition to being sexually violated, the slave would also be publicly humiliated. This public punishment would instill fear in other slaves and thus prevent any further rebellion. Really? That's what you had to do to scare other slaves? Enslaved men who were victims of this vile punishment often ran away from the plantations or killed themselves as they were unable to deal with the humiliation that they had suffered. It was often too difficult for them to integrate back into a society that had watched them being emasculated in front of their white children and friends. Now, the emasculation part. This is very similar to what we are witnessing in society today. Now, I have nothing against gay people. In fact, one of my very, very good friends is a gay woman. However, as it pertains to gay men, in fact, one of our Black Factor family is a gay man. I don't think he's on here tonight. But the deal is, black men in the last, I say, between 10 and 15 years, have been experiencing a social media, movie media, television emasculation. We've watched more and more black male actors being put in dresses. We've watched more and more shows where it seems like everywhere you turn, there's some gay black man on there, flashing and flaunting and just showing out. Like violence in our movies and our TV shows, it is no different than white shows who have the same things or similar. The problem with our image in the media is that there are rarely incidences where there is something else to offset these ideas and these images. It becomes a sort of media castration. When we watch our televisions today, two things you're seeing more and more of. You're seeing more black women married to, in relationship with, or acting alongside white males. You're seeing more and more gay men, particularly black ones, in everything that we watch. Now, I got jumped by my family many years ago, and they said I was being homophobic or something like that. I was being too, I was pointing out something that it was obvious to me. And it became, I let it go. I didn't push the issue because I felt like, okay, well, maybe I am being a little bit, maybe I'm going too far. Okay, all right. But I've watched over the years, and now the very same family, my children, my wife, have come to me and said, Dad, you were right. I'm seeing what you were talking about now. And it is a little ridiculous. Now, I'm going to get back to this buck breaking thing. The massive popularity of the practice suggests that buck breaking may have been utilized as an outlet for homosexual slave owners to act out their sexual desires on men without attracting the stigma associated with being gay. So, in other words, rather than admit they were gay and they like men, they used this violent act as an excuse to get their rocks off with men. Imagine that. Homosexuality during this era would have been shunned, but shockingly, raping male slaves as a form of punishment was acceptable. Tania Foster says, the commercials are really that way. I'm like, where are all of these interracial black women, white men couples? Yeah. See that, and that's the thing, and I'm. It's crazy to me that there was a time when the only black, white, or interracial situations that you would usually run across where the men were black was during the black exploitation period from the late 60s all the way through the 70s. And it was always seen as sort of a prize if you got the white girl. Unfortunately, that ideology has spilled over into a lot of our social thinking where we are today. But I have yet to notice where there was an equal amount of the reverse in any media, commercials, television, movies. It's not something that you see a lot of. And it's one of those things. I cannot pronounce. Let's see, Diara of Me, and that is from YouTube. Says they want you to get used to seeing that, and we often imitate what we see. I agree, absolutely. It becomes acceptable. You are desensitized to certain things, and it's not that we should be sensitive to it. If all things were fair, no one would care who went with who. Black, white, yellow, brown, don't matter. Whatever. It wouldn't be a big deal. But like I spoke about the race card earlier in this show, if that wasn't created by the powers that be and there were no racism, we wouldn't even be having this conversation to begin with. We wouldn't be talking about the double standards that come with the relationships. We wouldn't be having this conversation. But these are the standards and moral codes that were put into place by white men. Male rape is a taboo topic that is not discussed often. This would explain why buck breaking seems to have been a forgotten piece of history that is not talked about or taught in schools. It is important to remember and talk about even the most tragic parts of our history because this ensures that our past is not repeated. Unlike the nonsense that we're watching right now today with these people busting up into the Capitol and stealing sensitive documents and computers and all sorts of other things. And they are trying as hard as they can to dismiss this as though it was not a big deal. And they're saying that they're angry and it's not going to be peaceful if Donald Trump gets impeached. I had the unfortunate opportunity to have a back and forth with a Trump lover, a black one. It bothers me that I don't care what color you are. I wouldn't give a damn if you was blue with polka dots. I don't care what your political affiliation is. I don't care what your religious beliefs are. The bottom line for me is this. I don't have any respect for a person with no integrity. I don't have any respect for a person who lies just for the sake of lying. If you are one of those people and you are in my life, well, you wouldn't be because I would have already noticed and you'd be gone. The people that are around me that I'm friends with are people who I know are men, are real women. Kenneth Holden says it happened before in 1889. Yes, and that would have been in not Charlotte, in North Carolina. It was the only time. In fact, I talked about it on the show last week. It was the only insurrection in America that was ever successful, and in fact, they killed about 200 black people, public officials, people who were elected to offices. The entire town took a hit because all of the population of black folks who were thriving. In fact, this was considered one of the meccas for black people living in America, in the South. There were lots of doctors, lawyers, businesses of all kinds, and they were all destroyed because of an insurrection of white folks who thought that their lives would be forever changed if they allowed it to stand. If they allowed black people to remain in those positions of power, they felt that their lives would never be the same. Fear-mongering, just like what we're watching right now. We are constantly listening to the sycophants of Donald Trump and those around him who are trying to convince white people, fearful white people, that their lives are about to change and their whole sky is going to fall on top of them if they don't stop this, if they don't stop the steal, when there never was a steal. And like y'all always hear me say, it is easier to trick people than it is to prove to people that they've been tricked. Karen White Owens, was that in Tulsa? No, Tulsa, Oklahoma was a separate situation. Tulsa was not an insurrection. It was just a riot where lots of people were murdered out of jealousy, just like what we were just talking about on the show today here. They were murdered because they were doing better than the average white person. And just as good or better. That bothers them. This is why you have, Val, thank you, Wilmington, North Carolina. I couldn't think of what city. And this is why we have what we're having right now. This is why you see so many angry white people at the Capitol, jumping up and down, raising all this hell, because they're angry that they haven't done better with their privilege. They're angry because they feel like they can't get ahead. But what they don't know is that they were tricked a long time ago into believing that they counted to white people in power. There's no such thing as black and white. There's only green. And every time an election cycle comes around, these rich white folks trick these white people, these broke white people, into believing that they're more like them than they are broke black people. And they believe it. And so now when things don't pan out for them, they get angry, and now they want to take over the Capitol. They want to take over Washington. But let me tell you something about that. I had this thought today. Let's say they did take over the Capitol. Let's say they were within their reasonable right to stop some sort of wrongdoing in our government, which we know hasn't taken place. But let's say we did. Here's my question. See, here we go again. I told you, it's going to be more questions when you leave the show today than there's going to be answers. I usually have answers for you. Today, I just got questions. Here's the question. Let's say they went into the Capitol last week on the 6th and they took over. They got rid of Mike Pence or kidnapped him, did whatever they're going to do, grabbed Nancy Pelosi, and Donald Trump sitting there watching the whole thing on TV. And they literally handed this thing over to him. What next? What would be their next move? Can I tell you? Not a damn thing. They don't even understand that making a move like this, it's already weakened us. But making a move like this will get us all killed. Do you understand that there are other countries? See, this is what we forget. These people who live in this bubble, who think that taking over the Capitol, somehow they're going to get some freedoms. I'm not sure what it is they want. I'm not sure what it is they're looking for. Every time some freedoms are taken away, they're taken by Republicans. Where do you think the Homeland Security came from?
Where do you think the ability for them to surveil us and do all the things they're doing came from? They forgot about Ronald Reagan and his Iran-Contra scandal and all of that other stuff. They forget about all of these freedoms that they claim that they want were taken away by the very people that they support. Democrats ain't took no freedoms. They keep saying the Democrats are going to take this and going to do that, but it never happens. They claim Democrats, they've been claiming Democrats are going to take away their guns for the last 20 years. Democrats ain't took away their guns. The Republicans are the ones who put the gun law in place, the Brady bill, after Reagan got shot. That had nothing to do with Democrats. See, this is how dumb these people are. I don't care what your politics are. Truth is truth. Reality is reality. They're so worried about losing something, and all they keep doing is saying, y'all gonna take this and you're gonna lose that. And they just scare their people into believing it. These are the same type of scare tactics that were used back in the 1700s and 1800s when they had their well-regulated militias, when they had those people who ran up and down the highway chasing after slaves because they had fear of a slave rebellion. Why? Because they knew they were wrong to begin with. How you going to keep an entire group of people locked down in chain and think that one day they're not going to raise up for freedom? There's a thing called fight or flight. And in this case, fight, flight, or sit still and let massa do whatever he wants so you don't get killed because you're in fear. But they're the ones that's really in fear. That's why they're acting the way they're acting right now. That's why 70-some million of them voted for Trump out of fear. They're scared. This is why the Republicans sit there and allow this guy to lie to everybody, and they don't say a word. Fear. Because they're scared of what he's going to do to them. Fear. They let him do whatever he wanted. And now it's coming back to haunt them. And here's the funny part. I strongly believe that Donald Trump is going to get convicted on his impeachment. Why? Not because he's definitely done enough for me to believe he should have been impeached and convicted. But here's the real truth. The Republicans want their party back. And I don't blame them. If the Republicans had actually ran another candidate up against Donald Trump, like say Mitt Romney, the only Republican who stood up against him his entire 4 years in office, the only Republican with some balls, he would have won. I would have probably voted for him. And I'm not even really I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat. But at least Mitt Romney got some damn sense. Because I'm going to be honest with you. I'm afraid Joe Biden is a little too soft. I'm afraid that Joe Biden is going to let all of this go away, and the people who deserve to be punished for their insurrection won't be. I'm afraid that he's not going to do enough to put the hammer down to make sure that this never happens again, which means 20 years, if we're not real careful, this country is done. Done as we know it. Because these insurrectionists, they're coming. They're coming back. These same people who operate under the guise of the Second Amendment, which allows them to have a well-regulated militia. But the funny thing is, when you talk to any of these people about militia, they all hate the government. How do you hate the government that allows you to be what you are? Isn't that amazing? How is that not an oxymoron? Is that not the dumbest shit you ever heard? You hate the government, but it's the Constitution that gives you the right to hate the government and bear arms in doing so. Y'all are stupid. Anyway, but this is where we are, y'all. And if we're not very, very, very careful in our coming years, very, very shortly, you won't have to worry about your freedoms or anything else. If the insurrectionists had taken over the government, there's China, there's Iran, There's Russia. What do you think they're going to do? These are countries who hate democracy. These are countries who are itching for us to be destroyed. They're itching for us to come down and be taken out. What do you think they are going to do next? What do you think their move is going to be? They're not going to sit there and be like, oh, look, let's give them a chance to get their stuff back together. No, they're going to bomb the hell out of us. They're going to try as hard as they can while we're at our weakest, which has never happened in the history of this country. They're going to try to take us out. I don't know what part of that people don't get, but these guys, they think they got it all figured out. They don't. They couldn't even figure out what to do when they got in the building. They were all standing around looking stupid, staring at each other. This is what we're dealing with. So, anyway, like I said, my question is, where are we headed? How does a black woman lay down, make children, live a life with a man who hates everything about the people that she came from? It's amazing. Anyway, let's see. Tania Foster says, Trump administration trolled us today on MLK Day by putting out their 1776 report to erase the legacy of slavery and counter the 1619 project. I really dislike dumb people. They're a hazard to us. Oh, I so agree. But this is what we're dealing with, y'all. We're dealing with a person whose ego is bigger than the planet. And I've done enough today. So, for my stepping audience and some of my other people out there, ladies and gentlemen, next week we will be joining Oh So Smooth Radio. So you will be able to listen to us on the Oh So Smooth app as we go live every Wednesday. And you will also be able to check out the show streaming live, Oh So Smooth Radio. You can pick up the app on your Play Store or Google or wherever you get your apps from, or you can just listen to it on ohsosmooth.com. Don't forget also, we are now streaming, well, not streaming, but we're podcasting. You can catch us on Amazon, Stitcher, Spotify, and all the other podcast things that they got out there. We own all of them. And you can also join YouTube. Of course, you're on Facebook, most of you. Twitch, Twitter. Periscope is leaving on the 31st, so that'll be the end of that. Don't forget to get your copy of The Black Factor. Boom. At bmforbes.com. And don't forget to visit quotedlife.com t-shirts. I got the shirts for you, unapologetically black, y'all. So I want to say thank you to everyone. I appreciate each and every one of you coming and hanging out with me today and being on the show and enjoying our conversations and what we talk about. And hopefully I planted a few seeds, make you want to go look some stuff up and dig deeper and see where we at. Find out some stuff on your own. I want everybody to have yourselves a wonderful Monday evening. Happy birthday to MLK. Come Wednesday, y'all, I haven't decided whether or not I will be broadcasting, but 9 times out of 10, there will be something going on that's going to make me have to, since it is Inauguration Day. But we shall see. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I want everyone to have yourself a wonderful Monday evening. Thank you very much for showing up and hanging out. And we are gone. So love, peace, y'all, and chicken grease.